This is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update for October 21st, 3 p.m. Here's the close-up tracking map at Hurricane City showing our new tropical storm Richard well south of the Cayman Islands. And this shows you the cone of air. As you can see, there's an air all the way out from West Cuba all the way down into well deep into Central America. There's a few models that do take it in. I'll discuss these scenarios with the models in just a minute, but intensity forecast has always been a problem with the National Hurricane Center, and they could be way off on the intensity of this. This could end up being quite a significant hurricane here in the western Caribbean Sea, but that's the early indications. Now let's take a look back, going back in time a little bit to 2005, and show you the graphic on Hurricane Wilma. Now it's right around this time of the year. This is a great reference for the type of a steering flow and the projections for potential intensity of a system at this time of the year, considering the heat content in the western Caribbean Sea. Now on this date back in 2005, Wilma was weakening from a Category 5 down to a Category 4 here just southeast of the Yucatan Peninsula, and it would head into the Yucatan and sit there for about 2 days and just cause a whole bunch of damage in Cancun and Cozumel before heading towards South Florida. But it's interesting to note that on this journey, when this system was developing over in this area here, the National Hurricane Center did not indicate that this was going to become a major hurricane. And that's what concerns me about Tropical Storm Richard, is that they are forecasting Category 1, and I truly believe that this could end up eventually becoming a major hurricane. There's several models that indicate that. But keep in mind that the National Hurricane Center was off by as much as 80 knots going out 48 hours on Hurricane Wilma. So they did not have a very good track record at all on intensity for a hurricane in the western Caribbean at this time of the year. They also did not mention that this would become a Category 3 after leaving the Yucatan Peninsula and heading towards southwest Florida. They did mention it in the discussions, but it was not mentioned in the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center. So keep these things in your mind as we're tracking Tropical Storm Richard, because they did not do a very good job at Wilma. They did do a good job on the forecast track of Wilma, and that leads me to my next image. And this is the best performing model on Hurricane Wilma, and that was the AEMI model. Now this is the forecast for the AEMI for Richard. And it has Richard heading into the Yucatan Peninsula, then heading northeast, coming in near the Cedar Key area, near the Big Bend, Florida area. And again, this is the model that handled Wilma the best, going out 5 days. It was off by an average of 328 nautical miles, which the only ones that did better than the model consensus was the National Hurricane Center track at 310 miles off at 5 days. So the AEMI really needs to be paid attention to, and we'll see how if this shifts or moves at all in its forecast track. Right now it's showing Cedar Key at 5 days, so we'll have to see what happens with that. Now the second best performing model on Hurricane Wilma back in 2005 was the UK Met, and the UK Met currently shows this system just heading into Central America here and washing out over land. So the UK Met does not really show any kind of a pattern like this or anything near Florida. The UK Met takes it into Central America. So we'll have to see if that pans out. But those were the two best performing models on Hurricane Wilma. All right, here's the current model scenario. We have the global models, and this is interesting because I've been watching Invest 99L the last several days, and the GFS model has consistently been showing either no development at all or very limited development, and heading generally in the direction of Central America or the Belize or the Yucatan Peninsula. And the GFS continues to show this heading into the Yucatan and really not doing much after that. Compare that to the tropical models. The GFDL model here in green turns this into a major hurricane and then has it coming in Cat 3 status right near Tampa, Florida. That would just be the worst case scenario. And the HWRF has it coming closer to Cuba and hanging a right-hand turn, going a Wilma-type track over South Florida as a Category 2 hurricane. So the tropical models are a little bit different than the globals. The globals still want to take it somewhere down in the Caribbean here and keeping it down here, and the tropical models want to take it north. All right, here is the best performing model so far on Invest 99L. This is the HWRF model that I was just telling you about, and there's the forecast track right near the west tip of Cuba and then hanging a right-hand turn towards South Florida, coming right into Fort Myers near Naples. And that's similar to what Hurricane Wilma did back in 2005. And the H-Wharf has been off by about 78 nautical miles at 96 hours out. So far the H-Wharf is the best performer. We'll have to see how these models perform down the road. Now, as far as intensity, the GFDL is doing the best on intensity, but I'm really reluctant to show you that graphic because it does have this getting up to Category 4 status, but they're showing the GFDL is only being off by about 2 knots, and I think there's an error in the math there somewhere. It's a little bit off more than 2 knots at 96 hours so far, so I'm reluctant to show that. But the GFDL does crank this up to Category 4, and again, considering the National Hurricane Center's troubles with intensity forecast, and they did the same thing with Wilma. The GFDL showed Wilma getting up to Category 4, Category 5. National Hurricane Center was much more conservative in their forecast, and it turned out the GFDL was right on the intensity. So we need to pay attention to that as well. We'll see what happens. All right, here's all the storms in history that were in the same exact place as Tropical Storm Richard is in right now. Richard's in the yellow circle here. And back in 1943, we had a hurricane that moved just west and headed right into Belize. That's what some models are showing, including the UK Met. Then we had Hurricane Fox back in 1952, came up like this, and then went through near Cienfuegos, Cuba, and went into the Bahamas. And then, of course, we all remember Hurricane Mitch back in 1998. This hurricane developed down here, became a Category 5 hurricane. Again, that major hurricane status for systems in the Western Caribbean cannot be overstated enough. That the potential is there for this to become a major hurricane. But Mitch moved south into Honduras, weakened to a Category 1, killed over 10,000 people down there due to flooding, and then shot across the Yucatan and into Florida as a tropical storm. So that was what Mitch did, and those are all the 3 storms that were in the same exact position. All right, now I have to show this because, you know, I've had a lot of people that have discussed with me over the years about the MJO, the Madden-Julian oscillation, and this is the graphic showing whether the air is rising or sinking, and the green areas, which are over here in the off the coast of Africa in the East Atlantic, is rising air, which is favorable for development, and the brown lines here indicate sinking dry air, which is unfavorable for development. And that's exactly what we have over developing Tropical Storm Richard right now. So this is why I do not like to reference the MJO. I know a lot of people like to use it. I'm not a big fan of the MJO, and this is the reason why we have a developing system and we have negative conditions according to the MJO. So I take this with a grain of salt whenever I see this map being shown. I'm not a big fan of the MJO. All right, here are the sea surface temperatures in the Western Caribbean Sea in the southeast, and you can see that we have temperatures right around 85, 86 degrees all throughout the Western Caribbean Sea, and then they get down in the lower 80s up in here, in this area here. So if this gets up into the northern Gulf of Mexico, it's going to run into some pretty cool sea surface temperatures, and it might not have as much energy as it would have if it stayed down in the Florida Straits or down in this area, because once you get up north of about 25 degrees north, the sea surface temperatures drop dramatically compared to where it is in the Western Caribbean Sea. But that's the temperatures that we have to work with Tropical Storm Richard, which I'm sure will become a hurricane. And it's got a lot of fuel to work with. Let me show you this next graphic. This is the 78-degree isotherm map from the Hurricane Research Division. And the orange and yellow you see on the map in the Western Caribbean here are temperatures of 78 degrees or higher, which are able to support hurricanes. But these are temperatures well below the surface of the ocean. So even a slow-moving system like what we're expecting with this would cause normally cooler waters to be brought up from underneath, will be bringing up warm waters from underneath because it has plenty of fuel underneath the surface of the ocean, and it even sticks up here west of the Florida Keys as well. So there's plenty of energy for Richard to work with, even once it gets near Cuba or the Yucatan Peninsula. Here are the wind shear maps going out 72 hours, and this is important because if we look over here on the right hand corner, the 72-hour map right here shows that there's going to be less wind shear than there is right now. Right now there's the blue areas indicate wind shear up to 30 to 40 knots of shear over Florida. And if we go out 72 hours, you can see there's only about 10 to 15 knots of shear over South Florida. So if it were to take a track into the Florida Peninsula, it would not be that unfavorable going out past 72 hours. That is another factor in the intensity forecast coming up down the road. All right, let's take a look at the visible shot, close-up of our system. And you can see it's getting better organized over the day. Hurricane hunters have been out there the last 2 days. They've been unable to locate a tropical depression. But now we have a low-level circulation that's right in here somewhere, and the clouds are beginning to wrap around that center. And again, this is continuing to drift off to the southeast, and I think that'll continue for another day or two. And let me show you the, and by the way, the 30-degree temperature map here in the sea surface temperatures is right where this is right now. Very warm temperatures in the upper 80s. Now, if we go to the water vapor loop, you can see two things. You can see that the dry air continues to push into the western Caribbean Sea. And let's stop it right here. And you can see all this dry air, this orange-looking air is dry air, and that continues to push off to the southeast, pushing Tropical Storm Richard a little bit further to the southeast. But over the next 24 to 48 hours, this is going to start reversing and going back the other way, and Richard should soon follow and start to head in this general direction. And what I'm thinking we need to be concerned about with the steering flow coming up is all year long, or not all year, but in the month of October so far, the fronts that have been coming by have been very deep troughs with deep jet streams that go something like this. So if this were to get up into the southern, which it probably will, get into the southeast Gulf of Mexico, the flow would more than likely take it from west to east or east-northeast. A track like this is probably unlikely due to the fact that all the troughs this year have been pretty strong and the jet stream's been pretty consistent. So I'm thinking Florida Peninsula. Everybody that I know that's on my speed dial that asked me to keep them informed days in advance of an event, I've been calling them and telling them if you live in the peninsula, go ahead and get prepared. Get prepared now to avoid the rushes next week. It's not to say that we're going to have a hurricane coming through Florida, but even if it's a tropical storm, it can still cause power outages, and people need to be prepared for that. So anybody from North Florida all the way down to South Florida, including the Keys, should be preparing for potential hurricane next week. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that. All right, that's it for now. Tomorrow's update, we'll be all over this on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with regular updates. I will trying to get more in tune with what the models are thinking. We'll get more into that over the weekend. That's it for now. Visit HurricaneCity.com for the latest on Tropical Storm Richard. Thank you again for visiting Hurricane City.